So, Arsenal got their pre-season up and underway against Nuremberg yesterday. In today's video, I'm going to provide a little quick match analysis from what I saw in the game yesterday. And, just some initial comments, also some comments on Jakub Kiwior's inversion into midfield, and then go more into detail about other players at the end of the video. But we're going to start with the game as a whole, and I thought in the first half, the signs were really, really encouraging. The system and structure looked really sound, and each player looked really comfortable. And certainly, even in the second half, there are bits to be happy about, which I'll get into, even if it did lack fluidity at times. But I want to start with Jakub Kiwior and him inverting into midfield. There's no doubt when you look at Kiwior as a player, he has the technical flaw to succeed in that inverted role. And he always looked very comfortable when the ball was being played ahead of him. But press resistance is, if you have that technical flaw, the most important part of either a fullback inverting into midfield or even a centre-back inverting, taking that step up. And receiving with his back to the goal that we were playing towards, it was still a little lacking for Jakub Kiwior. I think Jurrien Timber, who has just been announced today, finally will slot into the inverted role on the other side straight away because of that more agile build and a really great turning circle. And Kiwior doesn't yet, but certainly in terms of physical profiling and build, doesn't have this. But I don't think this was the point that Mikel Arteta was trying to make. We will definitely see Kiwior inverting next season from fullback, I believe. But the point from Arteta was yesterday that we have that option. Kiwior won't invert in games where it's very hard to gain or maintain control of the football match. But allowing him to play in that inverted role against a very low opposition block when the press isn't very aggressive, like Nuremberg's really wasn't yesterday. And this, like I said, diversity is fantastic. It means it's not Zinchenko or nothing from the left-hand side. Zinchenko doesn't have to start in the team for us to be able to invert and promote a more left-hand sided bias starting lineup. Kiwior can do that too. And if you start with any combination of one of Kiwior or Zinchenko, or maybe even both, or one of Timber and Partey going into next season, you could potentially start the game with any combination of these two, knowing that we can change the dynamics instantly, inverting from right to left minute by minute, creating overloads against oppositions and that unpredictability, as managers find that so hard to plan for. And I mean, I thought we were unpredictable inverting before, whether that's having the option to start with Zinchenko or if he doesn't start, playing with Partey. But now we can switch from left to right in game instead of making substitutions or clearly setting up before a game. So that's what Kiwior can do, and that's something that Timber can do, and something he can be an upgrade on Partey at. I've spoken at length on Jurrien Timber on this channel, and how that inverted role is the one that he's being bought for. And look, I'm so excited for Jurrien Timber, and I will link the video in the top corner now that I did an in-depth scouting report on Timber and who we're getting from Ajax, and I'll leave the link in the eye. And I'll say again, he's a signing we should all be super excited for. But going on to the rest of the first half, something else I would like to comment on, really nice dynamics when Ben White is allowed to overlap, particularly Bukayo Saka. Partey often covers that area that White has vacated, setting up in not a 3-2-5, but shifting occasionally to this 2-2-6 shape when White joins on the right as a sixth man in attack. And it's lovely to have more men around Bukayo Saka. Even though Saka's goal was just him in brilliant winger isolation play again. It's great to have more men and more options, more fluidity around him, because of course it makes any winger better. And when you take someone who is as good as Saka is in isolation anyway, it makes him a very dangerous man. When you have someone on the overlap, someone like a Jesus making interchanges with him and so many rotations in the squad. Also, talking on Ben White, I thought his vertical passing was superb, and hopefully we can see a lot more of him finding Saka with those verticals going into next season. And again, this provides real quick isolation of Saka, this time of his defensive man one-on-one, and that can be very useful. I think certainly if Partey drops out of the team or even gets sold, Xhaka's also been sold. That verticality is very important to keep, and White in that right centre-back, right-hand-sided channel, if he can provide that, that's really good. Another couple of just notes that I saw from the first half in particular. Sometimes in this 2-2-6 shape or the 3-2-5 shape, we're really aggressive with our pivot on the edge of the box. I mean, Kiwior and Partey actually took a number of shots between them across that first half. So that was also interesting to see. And a quick comment on Eddie Nketiah. I think his strength and reliability holding up the ball and linking the play sort of in the short range was really impressive yesterday. And as a centre point of that front five was really impressive. It gives times for, again, the wingers to drift more centrally, have more runners off him. And I think he looked slightly rusty when he was in and around the box trying to get off a shot. But it's the first pre-season match. Let's not judge players too much. We're more looking at this point, general trends and themes and how we can analyse them. As I just touched on then, Nelson and Saka, they started on the left and right and really held the width before drifting more centrally into those more central channels. And the way Jesus and Vieira covered for Saka on that right wing going into the second half now, it really shows how essentially Nelson's future is pretty much predominantly going to be on the left going forward. A quick note on the second half. Vieira and Jesus, like I said, filled in for Saka on the right-hand side, and that's nice fluidity and interchangeability off that side. Jesus being able to drop into that right-hand-sided specialised 10 or advanced 8 to combine with the right winger is another great option. Nurnberg's goal was, of course, a complete fluke. Until that point in the match, they hadn't challenged our goal at all. It wasn't the right pass from Karl Hein in goal. Tierney, who also played that Kiwior role in the second half, had just pulled away from his man actually, and would have been able to go out wide to the deeper positions of White or Gabriel to start to platform the attack. So Hein in that situation didn't really have the pauser or the awareness yet, which is to be expected, just to keep all those options open. And Tierney inverting is interesting because he didn't hold his position as much as Kiwior. Unsurprisingly, he had a more liking to tugging the byline. But that about sums up the trends that we could see, even if some of us had pretty hard conditions to watch the game in for that match. But I'm now going to get into some player analysis and some more in-detail takes on some roles and some players that we have seen really properly for the first time. I want to start on the two youngsters, Nwaneri and Lewis Skelly. We'll start with Ethan Nwaneri. I thought he looked really decisive in his decision making. Looking at him, he's got a real nice low centre of gravity, and that kind of comes in his shorter, more compact build, I think, and that allows him to operate in those tight areas and also give him the speed and balance to burst out of them really quickly. And this sort of control of your body or your limbs at just 16 years of age is really impressive and encouraging. He's obviously left foot predominant, but the ball control and how he was so happy to receive the ball on the right was just about perfect. He still kills it dead on the right foot as well. And it kind of shows how impressive Nwaneri is. I think as well, playing in that right-hand-sided interior role, he's a more dynamic option to anyone we have there in the squad, bar maybe Emile Smith-Rowe, if Arteta sees his combination with Saka on that right-hand side a more dynamic solution going forward, and maybe leaving Odegaard to move across to that all-phase number 8 to facilitate that deeper progression that I might touch on later, I'm not sure yet. But that was a side note. I think Smith-Rowe's reintroduction means we still won't get as many chances as some people think from Ethan Nwaneri, but a very exciting cameo. Just as well, a bit of a shorter one, but Myles Lewis Skelly, arguably even more exciting in terms of his cameo against Nuremberg yesterday. He already looks so comfortable drifting deeper to pick up the ball and progressing it forward. The role we see by quite a few number 8s, we've seen Bernardo Silva take that role from wide or higher areas, dropping more centrally to help with the build-up before roaming into higher areas between the lines. But I also think with this ability to come deeper, Lewis Skelly has a real intent to progress the ball and create straight away. We saw that ball that he found Balogun through the middle with. He wants to create as soon as he picks up the ball. A similar build to Nwaneri in terms of how they glide with the ball in their shorter sort of agile frames, and they both seem to have that natural knowledge of timing, which is really nice to see, that natural gift at a young age. And I think what it shows is in that right-hand-sided interior, Arsenal have so many options going forward, whether that's Lewis Skelly or Nwaneri, Ødegaard, Smith Rowe, Vieira. And I mean, in terms of the other side, in the left-hand-sided number 8 or the left interior, if we don't sign anyone going forward in the window, this is something that will have to be seen. In some respects, I expect Declan Rice to play there for reasons that I've outlined in my video already on Declan Rice. But if we do go and sign someone, I expect Arteta to play Rice more as that, of course, number 6 that he's more used to. And I think people are forgetting Charlie Patino as well. Of course, if he stays, he can give us depth. Of course, he's not ready to start yet in that left-hand-sided all-phase 8 role, but he can certainly give us depth in that interior role as well. Especially if we can continue to see Ødegaard in that. I know he picked up a knock and didn't play yesterday, but he looks set to start in the role Vieira played in that right-hand-sided specialised 10. If he looks set to play there and not move across to that left-hand-sided 8 like I just touched on, if Rice plays there or whoever plays there, we might need a bit more depth anyway. But I think Ødegaard, especially if we don't see him in the next couple of matches playing that role, for this season anyway, that move looks out of the picture. And that's not unsurprising. I think moving on now, even further up the pitch, I'm going to touch on Folarin Balogun and maybe comparisons with Eddie Nketiah. It's quite funny how we've had just one game of pre-season and everyone seems like, this is the main forum of discussion now. And the main story, I think, with Balogun will be his missed chances. But I think overall, his movement looked really, really sharp. For example, when in that chance that he missed where he rounded the keeper and had that open goal, from picking up the ball from Lewis Skelly to driving past both the centre-backs, in which he looked really sharp and quick in, he was decisive to take it around the keeper as well. So I think in that regard, he's really good signs. And even in France, he underperformed his XG by 2 or 3, Folarin Balogun. But it's his ability to create these high XG chances constantly that makes him, that gives him such a high ceiling as a striker. I think it's clear that him and Eddie Nketiah now cannot both stay at the club, especially with the introduction of someone like a Kai Havertz. I'll get on to his position, and this is something I've spoken at length on in the future, but he gives us another option centrally as well. And I would have thought Nketiah maybe will be kept after the new deal and more aware of his role in the club. I think irrespective of that, Balogun and Nketiah will not be short of their suitors abroad, certainly for Balogun as well. And if we take Balogun and Nketiah in a bit of a mini comparison here, I think Nketiah is certainly, now that he's filled out his frame, Balogun could do this to some extent as well, is better at occupying centre-backs and linking play with those shorter distance passes, like I've said. Balogun is, on the other hand, better when he drops much deeper and is allowed to get on time, have time on the ball to play more progressive passes, even through the lines. But yeah, weaker in terms of linking play directly. Eddie is still, say, more of a powerful runner on the ball, but doesn't have the tricks of Flo. So they're similar but not identical players. Both have ridiculously good XG numbers in terms of per 90. I've talked about Balogun slightly underperforming his. His XG as the total only rivaled Mbappe on this front in Ligue 1. And Eddie was Arsenal's highest XG per 90 scorer last season, even ahead of the likes of Jesus. So both players are, in terms of movement in the box, are very good at fashioning chances for themselves. But I would say, in terms of on the ball and creating your own opportunities in the box, Balogun is probably slightly ahead of Nketiah in this regard, with the ball at his feet, in terms of manoeuvring into certain positions to get a shot off, giving you that extra half a yard. So it's interesting to see how this Balogun and Nketiah debate develops. But I'm probably leaning towards keeping Nketiah, but I'm really quite on the fence, and I think a lot of it will come down to Arteta's own preference, and whether he thinks that another full season, if Balogun can surpass Nketiah, because at the moment Nketiah probably still seems slightly more polished in terms of he's had more overall career minutes at the top level, and maybe it comes down to the fee that they could get for either as well. So that's the strikers done. I want to finish with this left 8 debate, which has been another one rampaging around the social media forums. Trossard and Havertz played in a very advanced left-hand sided number 8 role yesterday. But as I have said in my Kai Havertz videos on the channel, the number 8 position isn't a role that I think he will play. And I think looking at yesterday, we must account for the level of experimentation that goes on, especially very early in pre-season. Trossard and Havertz, who both played in that advanced 8 role, in terms of builds and really profiles as well, completely different players. So I've already touched on the experimentation and also the semi-successful Jakub Kiwior inversion into midfield. We also don't have everyone back. And we need to wait, I think, until transfers are certainly done to an extent to judge more the squad building dynamics. And lastly, I'll go back to it. If a left-hand sided number 8 isn't signed, and we probably expect someone like a Declan Rice potentially to play there, instead of his more well-known number 6 role if someone is signed. So there's lots of variables still to play, and I think we will see a lot more shifting as things become well more known and the squad becomes more pluffed out as we go into pre-season more deeply. But let's talk about Trossard and Havertz in the 8 yesterday, and what they did in the game before why this isn't probably a solution Arteta will be actually looking to in the long term. As to be expected, Trossard drifted much wider in this 8 role than Havertz, almost exclusively at times, combining with Nelson with passes on that left-hand side, on that byline. Havertz drifting more centrally and playing on more of a vertical axis, it seemed. Again, this is unsurprising and to be expected. Trossard also hung on to the ball for much longer as well, again, to be expected, being 2 different players in the 8. And in terms of playing with his back to goal, neither had to do this too much. But with a number 8 that is required to drop deeper and play often against quite an aggressive press, certainly a more purposeful side than Nuremberg were, Trossard may be even more suited to this than Havertz anyway, if he was ever to play there. I've heard that the inversion on the left-hand side, whether that's Zinchenko or Kiwior or whoever, frees up this left-hand-sided number 8 or right-hand-sided 8, depending on who inverts, to play higher. But regardless of where people play and where people invert, this is a bit of a myth that I have to break up now. Because Vieira or Nwaneri or Jesus dropping into that right-hand-sided interior role we saw yesterday were playing just as high, maybe even higher than the left-hand-sided 8. Mainly, the left-hand-sided 8 was so high in the first place because we were playing a side so prepared to allow us to do this. And even all of last season, when Zinchenko inverted for the vast majority before Partey from the right-hand side in the end, we still played with a left-hand-sided 8 in Granit Xhaka, who was multi-phased, dropped down to help facilitate that first and second phase progression, often against a press behind him. And Xhaka was good at this, dropping deeper alongside the 6, because he also had to play that abundant number of passes and had the range of passing. And I think defensively he had that positional awareness as well to intercept, to marshal space. and also more physical strength in terms of when he's running with the ball, even if it's not as quick as some other options. Then going back to last season, we had Xhaka in this left 8, and then more an advanced 8, or as I say, specialised 10 on the right-hand side in that interior role, which was Ødegaard. And these are not... Ødegaard wasn't required to make the number of passes in deeper build-up as someone like a Xhaka, before the fullbacks then invert and the left-hand 8 is allowed to drift higher up, as we saw Xhaka do anyway. The right-handed 8 or advanced 8 or specialised 10 is encouraged to have a much higher set point and starting point right in between the lines straight away. And look, I expect us to be fluid with our dynamics next season. But seeing Ødegaard and Vieira line up in this right interior role, obviously Vieira taking over with him, I don't think the dynamics are suddenly going to flip from the right to the left and drop a right inside a number 8 deeper, for example. Even if we play with something like a diamond, which I've seen has been cast around, and I don't hate that as an idea, it still doesn't change the responsibility of Havertz or Trossard if they were to play in that left-sided 8 role, even if Rice becomes a lone 6, because he's still going to need points to help build up from the back at times. And of course, just talking numerically, when a fullback inverts, you still have the same amount of players, whether you play a box or a diamond in the 3-2-5, on either side anyway. That doesn't change. So again, I can't see the dynamics suddenly changing, or spending 65 million on someone like Kai Havertz, who only improves us in that Xhaka role going forward, not defensively. Like I've said, when we need Havertz to play a left-hand-sided 8 role, he will. When we need him to play a right-hand-sided interior role, he will. When he needs to play a centre-forward role, he will. And this is because he's a Raumdeuter naturally. Wherever he is positioned structurally on the pitch, he will be given that freedom to link play between the lines, create space, attack the box, take advantage of pockets of space where he sees in certain channels, which suit our wingers, who are natural drifters from wide into central areas, not just purely byline retainers. So we can't simply label Kai Havertz a number 8, especially when he won't play there out of possession. That's my opinion. I'd love to see what you think down below. And if he ever does line up and occupy the number 8 role in possession at times, when we have the ball controlled and settled, out of possession, he's not going to play a number 8. I've already spoken about the roles required to drop deeper, and also defensively, that Xhaka was so integral last season. Havertz will either, out of possession, be one of the front 2 in our 4-4-1-1 press or 4-4-2 press. It will be one of those 2 front men if we keep with the same structure press-wise as we did last season. And this makes the most of his defensive qualities, which are in particular just his pressing. So what I'm trying to say, and what I've been trying to say about Havertz positionally, is that we need to rethink our interpretation of the left 8 role when Havertz plays there. But he will only play in this inside left channel when complete control of the match is guaranteed, so the fullback can stay inverted and we don't have to defend then with more bodies. This left 8 role is much harder to define with a natural Raumdeuter in Havertz there. He becomes, in this situation, a pure offensive utility that is even different to Trossard's aggressive role in the 8, who is much more press resistant than Kai Havertz. So I hope that clears up my thoughts on Havertz positionally, and how this will change throughout the season. And when he does play inside left, we need to rethink what a left 8 does. But what I will say is, most of the time, he will be playing in different channels, and this will become more clearer as the season goes on. For example, Havertz as a centre forward will play there, and that will be in a game where we need more from the 8 deeper. And this will probably be in more games than not, because the Premier League is at such a competitive level right now. And of course, this is dependent on whether Havertz is chosen to start ahead of others. But the great thing about Arteta's Arsenal is that there are so many different combinations that make us unpredictable. But either way, that's my opinion. Get down below in the comments on what you thought as the match as a whole against Nuremberg yesterday, and sort of the roles that you see certain players having, and seeing if you can change my mind about the left-hand sided 8, because I'm always interested to see what you guys think. Ultimately, that's just my opinion. And in terms of squad building, this will become much clearer down the line, and we'll have an answer going forward anyway. So it's not really a big of a deal. I just wanted to get a general match reaction and comment on a couple of things that have been going around the social media and discourse spaces. So drop down in the comments, let me know your thoughts. If you like this, like the video and subscribe. We just passed 1,000 subscribers. I can't thank you enough. It's been rapid growth, so I'm glad to see that you're all enjoying it. I'm really enjoying making these videos. And again, I'll get talking with you as I always do in the comments. I really want to create a forum on this channel for good discussion and anyone's opinions. And it's the first game of pre-season, and the main takeaway is we look very comfortable in that first half, as it should have. And I'm very, very excited, not just for Jurriën Timber, not just for Declan Rice, but for the rest of pre-season and to see what Mikel Arteta has up his sleeve. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.